My name is Amanda Parker. I'm married to an amazing man named Mark, and we have a little girl, Lily, who's the light of our lives. But back when I was 18, things weren't so picture perfect. I had just graduated high school, and it should have been one of the happiest days of my life. Instead, that day ended up being the moment everything fell apart with my stepmom, Sandra, and my brother, Ian. It was right after the graduation ceremony. I was still wearing my cap and gown when Sandra pulled me aside with that fake, tight smile she always had when she was about to deliver bad news. "Amanda," she said, almost sweetly, "I need you to know that the college fund your dad left behind won't be yours after all." Just like that. No explanation, no empathy. Just dropped it like it was no big deal. I froze, staring at her, trying to process. "What do you mean?" I asked. My dad had told me about that fund himself. He'd set it up for me when I was a kid. Sandra didn't even flinch. She just shrugged like she was discussing the weather. "Well, Ian and I talked about it, and we think it would be better if the money went towards something more practical. Ian has a plan for it, and honestly, Amanda, you've always been more of a dreamer. College might not be the best fit for you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Ian had always been the golden child, and Sandra treated him like he could do no wrong, but this was next level. "That money was for me. Dad wanted me to go to college," I said, my voice shaking. Ian came over, clearly eavesdropping, and of course he chimed in. "Amanda, calm down. You know I'll make good use of it. I'm planning to invest it, start a business. Dad would have wanted us to be smart about it. Besides, you can just take out loans like everyone else if college means that much to you." He said it so casually, like I should just roll over and accept it. My hands were trembling, and my heart was pounding in my chest. "You can't just take what's mine. That's stealing," I yelled. Sandra looked around, clearly embarrassed that I was making a scene, and hissed, "Lower your voice, Amanda. This is family business, and you're being dramatic." I wanted to scream, but instead, I just walked away. The whole graduation day turned into a blur after that. I remember sitting in my room that night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. My dad had passed away the year before, and he'd always been my rock. Without him, I felt like Sandra and Ian had all the power, and I was completely alone. The next day, I tried to bring it up again, hoping Sandra might reconsider. She just rolled her eyes and said, "Amanda, you're an adult now. It's time to grow up and figure things out for yourself. That money is being used for the family, which includes Ian." When I told Mark about it later, he was my boyfriend at the time, he was furious. "They can't do that to you. That fund was meant for your future." But legally, I didn't know what I could do. The account was in Sandra's name, and without my dad, I had no one to fight for me. Mark offered to help me figure it out, but I told him to let it go. I didn't want to fight a losing battle and make things even worse. So I let it go, or at least I pretended to. Deep down, I made a promise to myself. I'd prove them wrong. I'd show them I could succeed without their help. The next few years were tough, to say the least. I worked multiple part-time jobs just to scrape by while taking classes at a community college. I couldn't afford to go to a 4-year university right away, but I was determined to finish my degree, even if it took twice as long. Meanwhile, Ian was living it up. He'd started some business that was really just a fancy way of saying he was blowing through the money. Sandra bragged about him constantly, saying things like, "Your brother is so ambitious. You should learn from him." It made me sick. Mark stuck by me through all of it. He encouraged me to keep going even when I felt like giving up. By the time I transferred to a university, we were engaged. I remember Sandra's reaction when she found out. "Are you sure you're ready for marriage, Amanda? It's a big responsibility, and you're still figuring out your life." She said it with that same condescending tone she always used, as if I was some clueless kid. Ian, of course, chimed in with, "Yeah, maybe you should focus on your career, if you can even call it that." I wanted to snap back, but I just smiled and said, "Don't worry about me. I'm doing just fine." Those years in university were some of the hardest of my life. I was constantly juggling work, classes, and trying to keep my head above water. Most days, I barely had time to eat a proper meal. I worked evenings at a coffee shop and weekends at a bookstore, and in between shifts, I crammed in studying wherever I could. It felt like I was living on autopilot, just grinding day after day. There were nights I'd cry in frustration, wondering if it was even worth it. But every time I thought about quitting, I'd hear my dad's voice in my head, reminding me why I started in the first place. That fund might have been stolen from me, but they couldn't take away my determination. It wasn't just the financial strain that made it hard, it was the emotional weight of feeling completely unsupported by my own family. Sandra and Ian never checked in on me, not once. In fact, they acted like I didn't exist. Sandra was still throwing her little house parties, bragging about Ian and his big plans, while I was eating instant noodles and scraping together rent. I'll never forget the time I ran into Ian at the grocery store. He was picking up expensive steaks, and I had a basket with canned soup and some store-brand bread. He looked at me, smirked, and said, "Still doing that whole struggling student thing, huh? You could have had it easier if you just played your cards right." I didn't respond. I couldn't trust myself to speak without blowing up. By my second year, things started to shift a little. I managed to land a paid internship with a local marketing firm, which felt like a lifeline. The pay wasn't much, but it was enough to let me cut back on one of my part-time jobs. Plus, it gave me real-world experience, and for the first time, I started to feel like I was building something for my future. But even then, it wasn't easy. My days were a blur of early morning classes, afternoons at the internship, and nights spent studying or working shifts at the coffee shop. My social life was non-existent, and I was constantly exhausted. One of the lowest points came when my laptop died a week before finals. I didn't have the money to replace it, so I borrowed an old one from a friend. It was so slow that just opening a document took forever. I remember sitting in the campus library at midnight trying to finish a paper that was due the next day, and just breaking down. I wanted to scream at the unfairness of it all. But then I thought about Sandra and Ian, how they'd probably laugh if they saw me struggling, and that gave me the push I needed to keep going. I wasn't going to let them win. It wasn't just the lack of support from Sandra and Ian. It was the way they'd go out of their way to humiliate me, especially in front of others. There was one Thanksgiving dinner I'll never forget. I had just started college. I hadn't planned on going, but Mark convinced me to show up for appearances. I should have trusted my gut and stayed home. Sandra was hosting, and the table was packed with her friends and a few of Ian's business contacts, if you know what I mean. Everything was going smoothly, until Ian decided to open his mouth. "So, Amanda," he said loudly, smirking as he leaned back in his chair, "how's that glamorous student life treating you? Still making lattes and scraping by?" A few of the guests chuckled nervously, probably unsure if he was joking. I felt my cheeks burn, but before I could respond, Sandra chimed in. "Ian, don't be mean," she said in that fake, syrupy tone she always used when she wanted to sound magnanimous. "Amanda is doing the best she can. Not everyone is cut out for success right away." The way she said it, with that little pause before doing the best she can, made it clear what she really thought. Mark was my anchor during those years. No matter how bad things got, he was always there to remind me why I was pushing through. I'd come home from a late shift or the library, completely drained, and he'd have dinner waiting for me, even if it was just grilled cheese or leftovers. There was one night in particular that sticks with me. I'd just failed an important exam, and it felt like everything was falling apart. I came home, dropped my bag on the floor, and just started crying right there in the doorway. Mark didn't ask what was wrong right away. He just hugged me and let me cry until I could talk. When I finally got the words out, he said, "Amanda, this one test doesn't define you. You're doing something so many people would have given up on by now. You're allowed to stumble, but you're not going to fall. You're stronger than this." Then he made me hot chocolate and sat with me until I felt like myself again. It wasn't just his words. It was the way he believed in me. Even when I couldn't believe in myself. Knowing he had my back made all the difference. By the time I graduated, I felt like I'd climbed a mountain. It wasn't just the degree itself, it was everything it represented. I'd made it, despite all the obstacles, despite Sandra and Ian's complete lack of support. I didn't invite them to the ceremony. Mark and a few close friends were there cheering me on as I crossed the stage. I remember thinking, they don't get to take this moment away from me. It was one of the proudest days of my life. Not long after graduation, I landed a job at a mid-sized marketing firm. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well, and for the first time, I could breathe a little. Mark and I got married the following year, and not long after that, we found out I was pregnant with Lily. It felt like everything was finally coming together. Sandra and Ian? I didn't hear from them. It was like I didn't exist to them. Climbing the career ladder wasn't easy, but it felt like a natural continuation of the grit I'd built during college. I started at the bottom, managing small accounts no one else wanted. I worked hard, stayed late, and took on projects that weren't even in my job description. Slowly, people started to notice. My manager once pulled me aside after a big presentation and said, "Amanda, the way you handled that client, it's like you've been doing this for years. You've got a real talent for connecting with people." It meant the world to me, but it also stung in a strange way. Hearing praise from colleagues and managers, people who barely knew me, only highlighted how little I'd ever gotten from my own family. I'd sit in meetings where my boss would brag about my work ethic, or I'd overhear coworkers saying things like, "Amanda's a star, she's going places," and part of me felt empty. I kept thinking, why couldn't Ian have said something like that? Why couldn't Sandra have seen my worth? Instead, all I ever got from them were backhanded comments or outright dismissal. It was a hollow kind of sadness, knowing the approval I'd craved as a teenager would never come from them. My life kept moving forward, and with every step, I felt like I was finally building something solid. After a few years at the firm, I landed a promotion to account manager, overseeing a team of my own. It felt surreal. Just a few years ago, I was struggling to pay for groceries, and now I was sitting in meetings with executives, presenting strategies I had developed. Mark was my biggest cheerleader through it all. When I got the promotion, he surprised me with a little dinner party at home, just us and a few close friends. "You've earned this," he said, raising his glass to toast me. "No one deserves it more." Around the same time, we welcomed Lily into the world. The moment I held her for the first time, everything else faded away. I remember looking at her tiny face and thinking, I'm going to make sure you always feel loved and supported, no matter what. Being a mom added a whole new layer of joy and purpose to my life. But while my world was brightening, Sandra and Ian's was starting to crumble. Ian's big plans had fallen apart. His business tanked, and Sandra, who had always prided herself on her social status, suddenly seemed less confident. The whispers started to spread. They were struggling financially, and Ian was back living at home with Sandra. I'll never forget the day I ran into Ian and Sandra at the grocery store. It had been years since I'd seen either of them, and honestly, I wasn't prepared for how different they looked. I was in the organic aisle, picking out some fancy cheese for a dinner Mark and I were hosting. Lily was in the cart, babbling about something, when I turned the corner and almost bumped into them. Ian was pushing a cart with just a few items, mostly canned food and a bag of rice, and Sandra was trailing behind him, looking worn out and older than I'd ever seen her. "Amanda," Sandra said, her voice a mix of shock and awkwardness. Ian glanced up, and his expression hardened when he saw me. I didn't know what to say at first. I was standing there with my cart full of high-end groceries, Lily giggling in her seat, while they looked like they were barely scraping by. Sandra tried to muster up her usual fake smile. "You're looking... well," she said, her eyes darting to my cart. Ian just grunted, clearly too proud to say anything. "Yeah, things have been good," I replied casually, not wanting to rub it in, but unable to hide the satisfaction I felt. It was a stark contrast from the last time we'd crossed paths at a grocery store when I was the one struggling and Ian was flaunting his success. After that run-in, things changed. Suddenly, Sandra and Ian were trying to get back into my life. It started with small things, Sandra calling to check in or sending me awkward messages on social media. Hi, Amanda. Just wanted to see how you're doing. It's been so long. She never outright mentioned our encounter at the grocery store, but the timing was too obvious to ignore. Ian wasn't as subtle. He sent me a text not long after. Hey sis, we should catch up sometime. I've got some ideas I'd love to run by you. At first I ignored them. I didn't trust their intentions, and honestly, I was still too bitter to entertain the idea of reconnecting. But they didn't stop. Sandra started calling Mark too, under the guise of being a concerned stepmom, asking about Lily and how we were doing. Mark, being the kind-hearted person he is, told me, maybe they're trying to make amends. I wasn't so sure. It felt less like genuine interest and more like they'd seen how well I was doing and wanted to latch on. Part of me wanted to confront them outright, but another part of me was curious to see how far they'd take it. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon when I pulled into the driveway and saw Ian and Sandra standing in front of my house. At first, I thought I was imagining things. They looked out of place, like characters in the wrong scene of a movie. Sandra was clutching her purse tightly, her face tense, while Ian stood with his hands in his pockets, looking everywhere but at me. Mark and Lily were at the zoo with his parents, so it was just me. I couldn't go with them because I had to finish some things at the office for an important meeting that I was going to have on Monday. I sighed, already bracing myself for whatever this was. As I stepped out of the car, Sandra's face lit up with that overly rehearsed smile I knew too well. Amanda? What a coincidence, she said, as if they hadn't been waiting there on purpose. Ian gave me a stiff nod, still avoiding eye contact. What are you doing here? I asked bluntly, not in the mood for pleasantries. Sandra waved a hand dismissively, like my question didn't matter. Oh, we just thought we'd drop by to catch up. It's been too long, don't you think? I stayed quiet. Sandra plastered on her rehearsed smile, the one she used to soften bad news or manipulate people into doing what she wanted. Amanda, sweetheart, we've been thinking about how proud your dad would be of you. You've done so well for yourself. Look at this beautiful house. You've really built something amazing. I stayed silent, my arms crossed. I wasn't falling for her flattery. After a moment of awkward silence, Ian cleared his throat and finally looked at me. Yeah, what Sandra is saying is, we've hit a bit of a rough patch. Things haven't been easy, you know. Rough patch? I asked, narrowing my eyes. What does that mean exactly? Sandra looked at Ian as if he had jumped into it too fast. Oh, it's nothing too serious. Just some financial hiccups. Ian's business didn't quite work out the way we hoped, and, well, I've had some medical bills come up recently. We're just, how do I put this? A little strapped for cash at the moment. And, I pressed, already sensing where this was going. Ian shifted uncomfortably. And we thought maybe you could help us out. You know, just a little something to help us get back on our feet. Help you out? I repeated, incredulous. You're asking me for money? Sandra gave an exaggerated sigh, her fake smile dropping. Amanda, you make it sound so harsh. It's not like we're asking for charity. Just a loan. You're doing so well, and it's clear you can afford it. We wouldn't even be asking if it wasn't really necessary. Necessary? I echoed, feeling the heat rising in my chest. You mean like how it was necessary to steal my college fund? Or to tell me I'd never amount to anything? Is this one of those necessities? Ian's jaw tightened. That's not fair, Amanda. We did what we thought was best at the time. I let out a sharp laugh. Best for who, Ian? For you? For Sandra? Certainly not for me. Sandra put a hand to her chest like I'd slapped her. Amanda, that's ancient history. Can't we just move past that? We're here now trying to make amends. Doesn't family mean anything to you? Family, I shot back, my voice rising. You mean the same family that left me to fend for myself? That made fun of me for struggling through college? That never lifted a finger to help me? You've got some nerve showing up here and throwing the word family around. Ian's face turned red, and his calm facade started to crack. You're not being reasonable. You've got everything now. A house, a husband, a great job. We're just asking for a little help. You owe us that much." "Owe you?" I snapped. "I owe you nothing. Everything I have I built on my own, with no thanks to either of you, and now you think you can just waltz in here and guilt me into giving you money? Not a chance." Sandra's mask of politeness finally slipped. "I can't believe this," she hissed. "After everything we've done for you?" "Done for me?" I interrupted, laughing bitterly. "What exactly have you done for me? Besides making my life harder at every turn?" Ian lost his temper completely. "You're a selfish, ungrateful brat. We gave you a roof over your head, and this is how you repay us?" I stared at them, stunned by their audacity. "Get off my property," I said, my voice cold. "I'm done with this conversation." Sandra's eyes narrowed and she leaned in, her voice dripping with venom. "You'll regret this, Amanda. One day you'll need us and we won't be there." I stepped back, opening the door to my house. "Good. I've been doing just fine without you." As I stepped toward the door, Sandra let out a bitter laugh. "Fine, Amanda. Stay on your high horse. But don't forget where you came from. You're nothing without that fancy degree. And we're the ones who made sure you had a roof over your head to even get that far. You should be thanking us." Ian chimed in, his voice dripping with spite. "You think you're so much better than us now, don't you? With your perfect little family and your nice house. Don't get too comfortable, Amanda. Life has a way of knocking people like you down a peg." I stopped in my tracks, turning to face them one last time. "You're right. Life does have a way of knocking people down. You should know. You're living proof." With that, I stepped inside, closing the door firmly behind me. Even from inside, I could hear Sandra muttering angrily as they walked away. "Ungrateful. After everything we've done for her, she'll come crawling back one day." But as their voices faded, all I felt was relief. For the first time in years, I truly understood the power of closing a door, literally and figuratively, and this one, I knew, would stay closed. About a year later, Mark and I took Lily to an amusement park. It was a beautiful day. Blue skies, laughter everywhere, and the smell of popcorn in the air. Lily was ecstatic, pointing at every ride and begging to go on the roller coasters. We were making our way toward the food stalls when I saw him. Ian. He was coming out of a public restroom, wearing a faded park uniform and holding a mop and bucket. For a moment, he didn't see us. His head was down, and he looked exhausted, his shoulders slumped. But then, as we got closer, he glanced up and froze. Our eyes met, and in that instant, I could see the recognition, and the shame, on his face. Before I could say anything, he turned on his heel and walked away, pushing the mop bucket in front of him as fast as he could. His posture was stiff, like he was trying to hold on to some shred of pride. I just stood there, watching him disappear into the crowd. Mark noticed my pause and looked at me. "Everything okay?" he asked. I nodded slowly, forcing a smile for Lily's sake. "Yeah, let's go find that cotton candy stand." As we left the park that day, I couldn't stop thinking about Ian. Seeing him like that, avoiding me, ashamed, brought back a flood of memories. The insults, the dismissive comments, the years of being treated like I was less than nothing, and Sandra, always there to back him up, to twist the knife a little deeper. For so long, I'd carried the weight of their words, letting them make me feel small. But now it felt different. I looked at Mark, holding Lily's hand as she chattered about her favorite rides, and I smiled. This was my life now. A loving husband, a bright, beautiful daughter, a career I'd worked so hard to build. Everything I'd achieved, I'd done without them. And the best part? I didn't need their validation anymore. They'd spent years trying to tear me down, but here I was, happy, successful, and surrounded by people who truly loved me. I thought about how Sandra and Ian's lives had unraveled, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of pity. But it didn't last long. They'd made their choices, and they were living the consequences. I'd spent enough time mourning the family I wished I had. Now I was focused on the family I'd built, the one that mattered. As we walked to the car, Lily tugged on my arm, pulling me into her excitement about the day. I smiled down at her, feeling nothing but gratitude for the life I had now.